Before that late September 2000, I had never been to Naples, except to accompany my father to buy textbooks for higher studies. The fact that I had lost the decision to continue my studies when a week before I had already seen myself exiled for life from the outside world to some similar convent in the province thrilled and terrified me at the same time. My father was very disappointed. He feared a course to you to back down again this time. Know that there will no longer be anyone to support you in your choices. As for my mother, if it had been for her, she would have given me the sack by now. I believe that at some point, discussing it among themselves, my parents were already comforted by my imminent departure from seminary. The fact that I was no longer a headache for them, and that I no longer had to force them to deal with my problematic personality, it made them comfortable and devote more time to themselves and my other two brothers. And now this unexpected turn of the tale. You should lock yourself in your romance and forward and think about what you want to do with your life, was my mom's advice. Wise advice for a certain point of view, always better than that of my father, who already wanted to move me in way to keep his mother company. I would never have accepted, however, to sit around doing nothing for a whole year. I was terrified for losing a year of studies and overhauling a university already too old. Pointing for the finger again at random university guide, the course of that had come out was that of languages. I had never occurred to me in the previous 18 years of my life that my destiny had had anything to do with the study of foreign languages. In both middle and high school I had been given a superficial smattering of English and French, but no more than that necessary for a mundane conversation between beginners. The fact of enrolling, without any preparation for such a course, at university level, also gave me the right to dose of adrenaline to forget the moral and existential disaster that I had just survived. But what exactly was it at university? I hadn't even bothered to attend the orientation courses a few months earlier in high school. In my future, I only saw a career as a priest, so I was forbidden to be interested in everything else. My father, of course, knew even less than I did. After asking some friends with children who have recently graduated, he reluctantly took me to Naples to show me where the space headquarters of the Federico II Department of Letters and Philosophy were located. When I entered the complex of San Pietro Maiella, the former cloister of the Dominican friars used as humanistic pole, I immediately lost myself. I was not used to such a crowded and full of life environment, and I was not even able to look into the eyes of all those young people, mostly chattering girls, crowding around, eating or joking on the garden walls, who undoubtedly belonged to a classes on social status diametrically opposed to mine. My father asked the custodian where the pool of foreign literature was. I followed him with my head down without even replying to his disheartening comments. But do you see yourself here in the middle? Are you sure you want to continue? I was keen to tell him to go back, and maybe I didn't do it just out of pride. Once I got home, a tiny room cluttered with old school texts was waiting for me. How could that note in my throat have disappeared? And that, no doubt, would have led me to suicide if I had given up on the last shooting plans. The dean of what was still called the faculty in those years was sitting chatting with an assistant on the day of my visit. The corridor was deserted, and his was the only study open, with his usual impetuousness after having just knocked on the door of Giant. My father came in to ask for information about my son here. The professor gave him an angry look and chased him out with bad words, because according to him he had not waited outside for permission to speak or to advance. The father, at which Rage replied, and a real bickering was avoided. Only when the master noticed my lost stare, one step away from a flight of stairs. He told me to knock on the studio opposite, and that anyway the courses would only start in October. It was, A relief for me to meet at that point the woman of my mother's age who would later become my English teaching speaker, my English teaching teacher. He was most kind of that dean of the faculty and asked my father to me to sit in his room. She listened to the reason I put forward for my either unmotivated passion for languages and elucidated some points that were not yet clear on the development of the degree course, on the organization of the lessons, and on the preparation of the exams. What I could have never have foreseen is that the victim of a real anxiety attack, my father would burst into tears like a child and let off steam with the embarrassed teacher, dismayed to the point of letting me to do it for a good 5 minutes without having the cold blood to intervene. Why did a child like that happen to me? I'm a worker, I bring up my salary, I never make my life for children like anything. I looked at him bewildered all the time. How could a man to reduce himself like this, especially in such a place and in front of a person he had never seen? Eventually, the teacher tried to console him, telling him some of his existential misadventures. She was a very existential misadventure. She was a widow, had raised 2 teenage children, worked full of time, and was almost never home, and comforting him almost like a psychotherapist. She called him. She told him that things would settle down, and that certainly, given my excellent results at high school, I would have been a very good student. My father eventually calmed down, apologized for that moment of weakness, and immediately found that good humor that needed nothing more than the compassion of the neighbor. Well, now it's up to you. If you feel like it, can't you? Otherwise, retire. He repeated coldly to me on the train on the way home. I felt very motivated to continue at that point. I had gotten some coordinates along which to orient myself. The next study objectives were already outlined more clearly. I had a list of books to buy, a series of English channels to subscribe to start listening practice, to the listening, to start the listening practice, and even a list of film titles in the language of to be viewed over and over again, so that I would not lose focus already from the first autumn lessons. I will prove to myself that it was not a failure, that not a failure, that although I had believed for years that I was destined for a completely different life, the game was not yet lost. I was free. I freely chose to be happy. In retrospect, it was all too easy to see the impending disaster. Thank you for listening to me. See you in the next video.